Hi, this is RA, and I wanted to walk you through media placements inside of Honeycomb. A media placement represents a specific advertising program that we have purchased to drive traffic to a campaign. They can be found under the Advertising and Media app in the upper right-hand corner. If you go to that app, you'll find the Media Placements tab, third from the left. When you first click on the Media Placements tab, you'll see that you have a couple options for views. Often, you'll have so many media placements that you'll want to organize a view. You may do it by type. In this example, we've got them broken down into digital and traditional media to quickly get to them by type. A media placement is essentially one placement inside of a program. So for instance, if you have a magazine and you're on the back cover as well as a quarter page ad inside, that would be two media placements. If you have if you're buying inside of a website and you're in the email program as well as display, that would be two media placements. The importance of documenting and managing your media placements in Honeycomb is that it allows you to see how your spend in marketing, your media budget, is performing. Honeycomb's going to match the resultant behavior of a media placement back to the media placement. So let's look at the detail to show you what data is available there and show you how to set that up. So we're going to go into a specific media placement. I'm going to walk you through the fields now. Media placement name, that's what you call it. We like to be as descriptive as possible so that we can make sure that anyone who logs into the account can see and know what that media placement is. Sometimes we'll start off with the year and then where that's placed, but you can use any name that you want to set up to help distinguish them. A media placement is normally associated with a campaign. The media placement is what's driving traffic to the campaign. So a campaign would be broken down, its budget would be broken down into a variety of media placements to generate traffic for that campaign so that we can convert users. That's what this field is doing. It's linking these two. Impressions promised will often document during the negotiation process how many impressions were promised by a media vendor. We'll document that here. When we update the impressions promised in this sample, it'll take the budget and automatically calculate a CPM for us, so we can get an idea of just how much we're spending on a CPM basis and compare one buy to the next. In this environment, we've got a budget. This is the amount that we're spending on that media placement. You may choose to include the costs for production of creative, but the CPM field is calculated for you. And then there's a type of media placement. So we've got email, we've got leads. These are the ones that come standard with Honeycomb. You can change these types. We can change those to fit your needs if you need to change them. Then there's a field that will link it out to an advertising program. We've got a database of hundreds of advertising programs that you may be associating your media placement with, and that's what this field does. It links it to that. That will also help pull down standard data like dimensions for creative, standard contract options from the advertising program. When those advertising programs are updated, you'll see your data inside advertising programs updated as well, unless you have changed that data. The advertising program list can be found under this tab, Advertising Programs. The website, you may document what website it is so you know where to, when it goes live, you'll know where to check your display to see that it's coming up and showing correctly on that date. The insertion order link will take us to the insertion orders object, which can also be found under this tab just to the right. The insertion order is the contract, and there will be another video on both advertising programs and insertion orders to follow this one, so you can find more information in those videos. We can also add a variety of checkboxes and other data. In this case, we've got advertorial as a checkbox, value add, and A/B testing. Those help the creative, whoever's going to create the artwork for this advertising program, for this media placement, know how to structure and what kind of creative they should be preparing. For instance, if it's advertorial, there might be text that needs to be delivered. If there's value add, we may not want to spend a lot of time recreating a very unique ad because there's not as much value in this placement. If there's A/B testing, we might want to know that so that we can create two different messages to test that message. And on the right hand side, we've got the status. The status helps us know where it is in the process from the creative standpoint. Is it ready to be sent? Does it need revision? Whatever that might be in the workflow. Again, those can be changed to suit your workflow. The creative due date is when the creative is due at the media vendor. That's an important date for the creatives. They can look at that and determine how and when to create the assets that are going to be needed for this media placement. There's also a drop down for the creative status, where that is in the process, which is different from the media placement, like whether or not it's actually been placed or we need to follow up. The start and end date are important to identify when we should be checking in to find when we would come in, look for it to be live, make sure the tracking is working, make sure the placement's correct, make sure there are a lot of errors that happen in media placement. So by entering in the start and end date, it tells us when we should, and particularly the start date, when we should follow up to make sure that the execution of the media placement by the media vendor is accurate. It's not good to check it too late in the season because if you're very seasonal, you may not have time to get the vendor to correct it. A landing page is often used to determine where are we going to be landing these people. If the landing page doesn't have the right content, you'd want to know that ahead of time. You can determine that by running the media placement schedule, which is in the reporting section. The rest of these are data fields are related to print. And then down below we've got this whole section on tracking. Let me give you a word about tracking. The way that Honeycomb sets up and handles tracking is Honeycomb's integrated with Google Analytics. And more specifically, there are a couple fields you need to understand how they map to the Honeycomb behavior data so you can understand the importance of these fields when you're creating a tracking URL. The source object of a Google Analytics tracking URL is what is mapped to the media placement. So when we identify a source in Google Analytics, the source being like an inbound site, a source that's given, that is the field that's mapped to the media placement. And I can show you specifically which field that is. It's this one. This media tracking name, and you probably have seen the campaign tracking name. This is how we track the campaign object. This is the field that Honeycomb uses to identify where that lead, where that user found our website or how they converted. That's how Honeycomb matches that lead and their behavior back to the media placement. So we don't want to change this value. You can change many of these values after the media placement is run, but once a tracking URL is generated, we want to keep this value the same over time. If this link gets uploaded to TripAdvisor and then we change the media tracking name after the fact, when that person converts, Honeycomb wouldn't be able to find them and associate that lead as a result of this media placement. So that's an important field. The tracking URL field is generated by clicking on the Generate Tracking URL button at the top of the media placement. Most of the data is already generated. When I click on Save, it will generate the tracking URL and put it back into that field. If you need to give it to someone for their usage, like a media vendor, you would do that right here. You'd copy this, send it to them. You can also click on Test URL, which will open up a browser window and tell you if it's correct. An important thing to note is that this tracking URL is generated once in time. So you don't need to keep generating it unless you're changing something. If you change the landing page, or you change the media tracking name, or the campaign that it's associated with, you would need to regenerate that tracking URL. Just keep in mind that you don't want to change the media tracking name. Also important to note is that Honeycomb will force you to have a unique media tracking name. So if you already have a tracking name, media tracking name that is exactly like this, it will give you a note and let you know you need to generate one that's unique. The last thing is this short tracking URL. If you have a Bitly account or create a Bitly account, we can enter in that login information. Honeycomb will use that login information, generate a Bitly or short URL, and produce that for you in this field. Underneath a media placement, we have a couple different related items. We have notes and attachments. If I get information from a media vendor, or I have creative files I want to use later, I can attach those files here. I can create an insertion order, generate an insertion order from the media placement level. I can also track impressions. I can manually enter those. Sometimes, for instance, we may want to enter in the number of impressions, the circulation of a magazine after the fact, so that next year we can look back and determine if the number of impressions promised, which would be the circulation of a magazine, did in fact match what we were given. Oftentimes you're promised a certain circ. We might want to document that for negotiations, or to choose a better publication for print later, and I can record the number of impressions for this year right here. Then there's also daily stats. Going forward, daily stats will be used to generate some information from Google Analytics, and that would show up there. So that is an introduction to media placements. Thank you.